The silent ward. The emergency beacon had been screaming across subspace for 3 weeks before the relief ship Meridian's Hope finally reached. Outpost Kepler 7. Medical officer Elias Voss had seen refugee stations before overcrowded, understaffed, reeking of desperation and recycled air. But this one felt different. Too quiet, too still. Planetary bombardment wiped out their homeworld, explained Station Commander Zara Novak as she led him through sterile corridors. We pulled 47 Zirithi survivors from escape pods. Most are recovering, but there's one. She paused at a sealed door. Room 12. We found her in a life pod that had been floating dead in space for months. No power, no life support. She shouldn't have survived. Elias peered through the observation window. A small figure sat motionless in the corner, knees drawn. To her chest, silvery hair cascading over her face. Thin, luminescent lines traced patterns across her exposed arms and neck, some kind of biocircuitry he'd never seen before. Has she spoken? He asked. Not a word. Doesn't eat, barely drinks. The other Zirithi won't go near her. They whisper about the touched ones, those marked by the enemy. Zara's voice dropped. They say her kind can't be saved. Elias studied the motionless figure. In 12 years of xenomedicine, he'd learned that trauma spoke in many languages, but silence was often the loudest cry for help. What's her name? The manifest listed her as Kari Velneth. Designation, civilian. Zara shrugged. That's all. We know. He watched as Kari's chest rose and fell with mechanical precision. Too precise. Too controlled. Like someone fighting to maintain basic functions while everything else shut down. I'll need access to her room, Elias said. Doctor, with respect, our medical team has tried everything. Sedatives don't work on her physiology, and she won't respond to any stimulus. She single quotes S. Gone. Elias remembered his first day in xenomedical training. His instructor, a grizzled veteran named Marcus Webb, had said something that stuck. The body heals what it can. The mind hides what it must. Our job is to make both feel safe enough to let us help. Maybe, he said quietly. But I've never met a patient who is truly gone. Just ones who haven't found their way back yet. That evening, Elias entered room 12 with a cup of warm broth and a portable chair. Kyrie didn't acknowledge his presence. He sat down 3 meters away, close enough to help, far enough not to threaten, and began to speak in soft, measured tones about nothing important. The weather, the station's recycling systems, his journey here. For 2 hours, she never moved. When he finally stood to leave, placing the untouched broth on a nearby table, Kari remained exactly as he'd found her. But as he reached the door, Elias could have sworn he heard the faintest change in her breathing. Breaking Protocol Day 7. Brought no change. Kari sat in her corner like a beautiful broken statue, those strange bioluminescent lines pulsing dimly beneath her pale skin. The other medical staff had written her off as catatonic, but Elias noticed things they missed. The way her fingers twitched when footsteps passed in the corridor. How her breathing hitched when the station's gravity generator cycled. She was listening, always listening. You're wasting time, Voss, Dr. Marcus Holloway said, reviewing Elias's daily reports. Command wants this station operational. We can't spare resources on lost causes. She's not lost, Elias insisted. Her vitals are too steady, too controlled. That's not catatonia, that's survival mode. Survival mode? Holloway laughed bitterly. Look at her. She hasn't moved in a week. But Elias had served on frontier worlds where silence meant the difference between life and death. He recognized the signs. Kari wasn't broken. She was hiding. That evening, he changed his routine. Instead of sitting across the room, he positioned his chair closer still, respectful of her space, but within arm's reach. As he spoke about his homeworld, New Geneva, he noticed something new. When he mentioned the orbital bombardment that had claimed his childhood home, Kari's luminescent lines flared brighter for just a moment. "You understand loss," he said softly. "Don't you?" The lines dimmed, but the pattern remained etched in his memory. The marks weren't random, they formed complex geometric shapes, almost like circuitry, or perhaps neural pathways mapped onto her skin. On day 10, Elias brought a small holographic projector. He activated it while sitting with her, displaying star charts of the local sector. When he showed the Zirathi home system now a dead zone, marked in red, Kari's breathing stopped entirely for 30 seconds. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "for whatever you lost, for whatever you saw." The bioluminescent lines pulsed once, like a heartbeat made of light. Day 14 brought breakthrough and terror in equal measure. Elias had been reading aloud from a xenobiology journal, his voice growing drowsy in the warm room. Without thinking, he stood to stretch his legs and moved toward the door. That's when it happened. A small, trembling hand shot out and grasped his wrist with surprising strength. Elias froze, looking down into eyes that glowed with the same pale light as her markings. For the first time since he'd met her, Kari was looking directly at him. "Vel Nathi Kai," she whispered, her voice like static over a dying comm channel. "Vel Nathi Kai Morden." The words meant nothing to him, but the terror in her voice was universal. Her grip tightened, and the luminescent lines across her body began pulsing rapidly, like a neural network overloading. "It's okay," Elias said gently, not moving. "I'm not going anywhere." But Kari's eyes weren't seeing him anymore. They were, wide with panic, staring at something only she could perceive. Something that came when people moved. Something that had learned to hunt. Neural Echoes DR. Yuki Tanaka arrived on the next supply shuttle, her reputation as a xenoneurologist preceding her. She'd worked with trauma-induced neural modifications before soldiers who'd had their memories altered to survive interrogation, civilians whose minds had been rewired by alien parasites. But she'd never seen anything like Kari's bioluminescent network. "The patterns aren't random," she explained to Elias, studying the neural scans they'd managed to take while Kari slept. "They're memory engrams, physical representations of experiences encoded directly into her nervous system. Like a biological hard drive? More complex than that. Her entire memory structure has been reorganized, compressed, hidden." Tanaka highlighted sections of the scan. "See these dark areas? That's not brain damage, it's encryption. Someone or something locked away parts of her mind." Elias thought about Kari's reaction when he'd moved toward the door. Could it be a defense mechanism? Something to protect her from traumatic memories? Or to protect others from what she knows? Tanaka said grimly. They'd moved Kari to a specialized medical bay where they could monitor her neural activity in real time. The bioluminescent lines were more active now, pulsing in complex patterns. That reminded Elias of data transmission. Every few hours, she would whisper fragments in her native language. "Velnathi Kai Morden. Vek Sai Vel Morden." Linguistics officer David Crane had been working around the clock to decode her words. His translation matrix finally produced results that made everyone's blood run cold. "Velnathi Kai Morden" roughly translates to, "They come when you move," he reported. "Vek Sai Vel Mordan" appears to mean death follows motion. Motion. "Triggers?" Elias asked. "Like some kind of predator response?" "That's what I'm thinking." The Zirathi survivors mentioned something called the Pale Hunters, creatures that could track any movement across vast distances. They say the hunters were what made planetary evacuation impossible. Dr. Tanaka pulled up another neural scan. "Look at this. Every time someone moves quickly in her vicinity, these memory clusters activate. It's like she's reliving the same traumatic event over and over. But Elias noticed something else. When the memories activated, Kari's bioluminescent lines didn't. Just pulse randomly, they formed specific patterns. Almost like ... she's trying to communicate. He realized. The patterns. They're not just memories, they're messages. That night, Elias sat with Kari again, but this time he brought recording equipment. As he slowly reached for a water glass, her lines flared to life. The pattern was brief but distinct. 3 parallel lines, a spiral, then a series of dots, coordinates. Tanaka suggested when they reviewed the recording. Or a warning, Elias said. He looked through the observation window at Kari, who had returned to her silent vigil. She's not just remembering what happened to her world. She's trying to tell us something about what's coming to ours. The station's proximity alarms chose that moment to sound. Commander Novak's voice crackled over the intercom. All personnel. To stations. We have unknown contacts approaching from the quarantine zone. Through the viewport, Elias could see them. Pale shapes moving through space with unnatural, predatory grace. And in her room, Kari began to scream. The hunters arrived. The first wave hit the station's outer hall with surgical precision. Emergency lights bathed the corridors in red as station commander. Novak's voice echoed through the comm system. Hull breaches on decks 3 through 7. All security teams to defensive positions. But Elias wasn't listening. He was watching Kari. Through the medical bay's reinforced window, as her bioluminescent lines blazed like a star map in full display. For the first time since it met her, she was standing not in panic, but with grim purpose. The patterns, Dr. Tanaka breathed, monitoring the neural readouts, they're not random anymore. She's interfacing with something. The lights. On Kari's skin formed complex geometric shapes, pulsing in sequence like a language made of living electricity. And suddenly, Elias understood. The bioluminescent network wasn't just storing memories. It was a communication system. A way to share information across vast distances without traditional technology. She's not marked by the enemy, he said, pieces falling into place. She's marked by her own people. She's a living message. Through the station's sensors, they could see the pale hunter's creatures that moved like liquid mercury, but struck. Like surgical instruments, they flowed through the breached hull sections, seemingly unaffected by vacuum or gravity. But they weren't attacking randomly. They were searching for something, or someone. They're tracking her, Commander Novak said, bursting into the medical bay. Whatever those things are, they've locked onto this section. We need to evacuate. No. Kari's voice cut through the chaos, weak but clear. She turned from the window, her glowing eyes fixed on Elias. No run, no hide. Time for truth. Dr. Tanaka's instruments went wild as Kari's neural activity spiked beyond measurable levels. The bioluminescent lines across her body synchronized, pulsing in perfect unison. When she spoke again, her voice carried harmonics that seemed to bypass the ears entirely, speaking directly to the mind. I am Kari Velneth, last keeper of the neural archives. My people ... my people chose to preserve rather than destroy. The hunters seek what I carry, the location of the refuge worlds, where 10 billion Zirathi survivors wait in hidden colonies. She pressed her palm against the nearest wall panel, and the station's computer systems suddenly came alive with information. Star charts, population records, defensive positions, everything the hunters needed to find and destroy the last remnants of her species. But I also carry this, Kari continued, her lines shifting to a new pattern, one that may be approaching. Hunters pause in their relentless advance. The shutdown code. The thing that can make them sleep again. Elias realized what she was asking. The hunters wouldn't stop until they had the information in her mind. But they also couldn't resist the promise of that information. She was bait in a trap decades in the making. The neural encryption, he said. It wasn't to hide the memories from you. It was to hide them from the hunters until the right moment. Kari nodded, tears of light streaming down her face. But I cannot cannot activate it alone. The code requires requires trust. Someone must choose to stay while others flee. Someone must choose to share the burden. Through the hull breach, they could see the hunters massing outside the medical bay. Beautiful and terrible, like angels made of bone and starlight. Waiting. What do you need? Elias asked. Your hand, Kari whispered. Your choice. Your willingness to carry what I carry, so that my people might live. The station shuddered as more hunters attached themselves to the hull. Time was running out, and Elias knew that whatever choice he made would determine the fate of not just the survivors on this station, but 10 billion refugees hidden among the stars. The choice that saves worlds. Elias looked at Kari's outstretched hand, her bioluminescent lines pulsing with urgent light. Through the medical bay's reinforced walls, they could hear the hunters cutting through the hull with sounds like singing. Metal. Dr. Tanaka was frantically downloading what data she could, while Commander Novak coordinated the evacuation of non-essential personnel. If I take your hand, Elias asked, what happens to me? You become like me, Kari said simply. A keeper of secrets, a living archive. The hunters will always be able to find you, as they found me. You will carry the burden of 10 billion lives, and the loneliness of being the only one who knows where they hide. And if I don't? The hunters take what they need from my mind and find the refuge worlds anyway. My people die, and yours will. Be next. The hunters do not stop. They never stop. The wall behind them began to glow cherry red as the hunters' cutting tools found their mark. Elias could see their forms moving in the corridor, beyond tall, graceful figures that seemed to be made of crystallized moonlight and ancient hunger. There's a third option, Dr. Tanaka said suddenly, looking up from her instruments. The neural patterns Kari's been displaying, they're not just communication. They're a distributed network protocol. If multiple people shared the load, No, Kari shook her head. The burden is too great. It would kill those not prepared. Only one can... Not one, Elias interrupted, understanding flooding through him. All of us. Humans have something your people might not have had when the hunters came. We have a choice to stand together. He reached out and took Kari's hand. The moment their skin made contact, his vision exploded with light and information. He saw the Zirathi homeworld in its final moment cities of crystal and song, consumed by creatures that moved like liquid death. He felt the weight of coordinates burned into living memory, the locations of hidden colonies where survivors waited in hope and terror. But he also felt something else, the strength that came from not bearing the burden alone. Tanaka, he gasped. Through the neural download, your hand, now. The xenoneurologist didn't hesitate. The moment she joined the link, the patterns on Kari's skin shifted, becoming more stable, more controlled. Commander Novak followed, then David Crane from linguistics, and finally the handful of remaining medical staff as their minds connected through Kari's bioluminescent network. Something unprecedented happened. The hunters, poised to break through. The final barrier suddenly stopped. Their movements became uncertain, almost confused. They can't track us, Kari whispered in wonder. The neural signature is too diffuse, too human. But more than that, as the human minds integrated with the Zirathi memory network, they began to understand the hunter's true nature. Not just predators, but weapons. Biological machines created by a species that had died out eons ago, programmed to seek and destroy any civilization that might threaten their creator's legacy. and programmed to shut down when confronted with something they'd never encountered, a species willing to share another's burden without seeking to dominate or control. The shutdown code, Elias realized, it's not a code at all. It's compassion. The hunters began to withdraw, their crystalline forms losing cohesion as conflicting imperatives warred within their ancient programming. Through the neural link that connected humans and Kari could feel their confusion, their gradual deactivation as they encountered something their creators had never anticipated. A species that chose to help rather than conquer got as the immediate threat passed. Elias felt the weight of 10 billion lives settling into his consciousness, not as a burden, but as a trust shared among friends. The refuge worlds were safe, their locations now distributed among minds that would guard them with the fierceness of their own humanity. What happens now? Commander Novak asked. Kari smiled, her bioluminescent lines pulsing with warmth instead of fear. Now my people can come home, and yours. Yours have shown that some burdens are lighter when carried together. Through the viewport, the first Zerathi refugee ships began to emerge from hyperspace, guided by signals from the neural network that now spanned species. The age of hiding was over. The age of cooperation had begun, and in a small medical bay, on the edge of known space, a human medic named Elias Voss learned that sometimes the greatest healing comes not from curing the patient, but from choosing to share their pain.